This is Only the Strong Survive, a podcast powered by Kahn Media, where we dive deep into the world of business, leadership, and innovation. I'm your host, Dan Kahn, and I'm honored to have you join us today. So, let's get ready to learn some survival skills together. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Only the Strong Survive. I'm your host, Dan Kahn, and I am really excited for today's show. Our guest today is someone who has made a huge impact on me. I saw him speak at a marketing event 3 or 4 years ago, read a couple of his books, and I've been following his blog for many years. Mark Schaefer, thank you so much for coming on the show and joining us.
Dan, I'm really excited to talk to you today.
So I guess, first of all, just to give everyone, I'd like you to kind of introduce yourself, but so everyone knows your background. You've written a lot of marketing books that are all bestsellers.
This is my 11th book. My new one's 11.
And you've also worked with some amazing brands, Adidas, Johnson & Johnson, the U.S. Air Force. You read an amazing blog called Grow. Give us some background. Tell us kind of who you are, and you've had this kind of incredible career.
Yeah, I'm such an overachiever. I look at my career, it's like, what in the world just happened? Well, I think in my heart, Dan, I'm a teacher. I've always been a teacher. I think a great leader is a teacher. So when I was in the corporate world, I was a well-known leader in my company. I left to do my own thing and start my own consulting company. Oh gosh, I think it was 16 or 17 years ago now. And then on a whim, started a blog because I wanted to learn about social media. I wanted to learn about content, and the blog sort of took off, and the blog led to invitations to write books. I never even thought about writing a book before, and it turned out I was pretty good at it. It was something I enjoyed, and the books became popular, and that led to speaking opportunities and also in the consulting, as you say. So I'm a teacher, and I love solving hard marketing problems, hard business problems. That's where I really thrive. And maybe that's why my books are so popular, because they take on difficult problems.
Well, going back a little bit, Mark, and we're definitely going to get into your books and certainly your most recent one, but to give people sort of a picture of your life and your career, I know you've said in the past on your blog and other interviews that you kind of grew up in a small town and that had an impact on your values. Can you give us a little context around that? Give us your backstory on kind of where you came from.
I'm definitely a blue collar guy. I came from very humble roots. My family was a great family of plumbers. In fact, I was just thinking and writing about this, Dan. There was sort of this singular moment in my life, I think, that made me into an entrepreneur. When I was 10 years old, I loved baseball. I was obsessed with baseball. And there's this picture of me standing proudly in my Little League baseball uniform. And I'm wearing these tattered old green tennis shoes. They were awful. And I was just so humiliated. I couldn't afford baseball shoes. And I sort of became determined I've got to do this myself. So I started selling door to door when I was 10 years old. Back then, you look in the back of comic books to see I sold Christmas cards, magazine subscriptions, flower seeds in an area of a place that had no gardens, but people bought seeds from me anyway, because I think they felt sorry for me. And more or less, just starting at 10 years old, I tried to find any way I could to make money. And that led to cutting grass and babysitting and washing cars. I had a part-time job when I was 14 years old. So that's what really kind of fueled me, because I had to buy my own shoes. I had to do that. And eventually I bought a bicycle so I could get to practice. And I remember a milestone day when I was probably 13. When I bought my first new piece of clothing. I bought a brand new shirt, which my mother then ruined in the wash, but that's a story for another day. And really, I think that kind of ignited me. It ignited this sort of self-sufficiency, this drive that really hasn't stopped.
I love that. I think that's probably pretty common among a lot of entrepreneurs I talk to. And that's pretty much all most of the conversations we have here.
There's a good part to it and there's a bad part to it. I had a very wise teacher once who told me there's no such thing as a weakness, just an overdone strength. So self-sufficiency is good. I think it sort of turned into money anxiety. I wasn't really working to achieve a goal. I was working because I was afraid to be poor. So I'm still working on that. I'm a work in progress to get over some of this anxiety and self-sufficiency. But in some respects, it served me well.
You have this sort of epic career in not just marketing, but in sort of marketing thought leadership. Did you know what marketing was in your 20s? Like, was that like a goal? Like, I want to work in marketing and drive the sales process? Or was that like an accidental thing that just sort of evolved over time? How did that happen?
A little of both. I started out, my undergraduate degree was in journalism. It served me very well. Hopefully you too. The curiosity and the communication skills, I think, are great skills. In my junior year, I took a class in marketing and I opened up this book, The Principles of Marketing by Dr. Philip Kotler. I actually have the book behind me. I bought the original copy I had in college on eBay. And when you open up the book, Dr. Kotler says, marketing is a combination of psychology, sociology, and anthropology. That is the coolest thing ever. I want to do that. Marketing is all things human. But I didn't have enough money and I didn't have enough time to change my degree. So I got a minor in marketing, but kind of knew that's what I wanted to do. And then got myself into positions to start out really in journalism and communications. But eventually I wanted to get into marketing. And then once I got that job I was with a Fortune 100 company, I just had tremendous experiences, did every type of marketing you can think of. And then when it was time to start my own business, I had a great platform to work from.
Is there a campaign that stood out in your early career that you can remember that was kind of the aha moment? Either a great one that you were super proud of, or maybe not. But is there any kind of early campaigns you really think back on?
In my corporate days, the project I was most proud of, I was in marketing and I had a boss that was like 45 and he wasn't going anywhere. And I think I'm looking around thinking, what am I going to do? And this new thing started called the internet. I started playing around with it and I told my boss, I said, I think there's something here. I'd like to do some experiments with this. I would like to get an AOL account and put it on my expense account. He thought this was folly, argued up and down, but eventually I was the first person in my company with an internet account. Because of that experimentation, it led to some successes. And I became the first global director of e-business for this Fortune 100 company. The project that I'm really proud of is we created an intranet. This was before SAP, Oracle, Salesforce. We created this thing from scratch. We were so ahead of our time, we had to install the computer terminals at our customer locations all over the world. And it might have been the first intranet in the world. I don't know how I would ever verify that. We didn't even know how far ahead of the world we were because we were just doing our jobs. And we created all the software. Our customers could place their orders, check their orders, change their orders, all online, early e-commerce without ever talking to a person. It saved us millions and millions of dollars. And we didn't really know how bold we were. We didn't really know how early this was in the history of the internet, but that was a pretty cool project and it worked great.
That's cool. So you inserted kind of velocity into the process. You made it faster and smoother, and
velocity and innovation because it just had never been done before. The company I worked for was like a holding company of 40 different businesses around the world. Each business had their own idea of what they wanted to do. Our process became sort of a Wikipedia that every new business idea we could then offer to every other business and build this thing really inexpensively.
I love that. For everything I've read, it seems like you're still working on versions of that now, just with much more modern technology and methodology. I wanted to ask you, because I know you teach, I think at Rutgers, is that right?
Yeah, that's true.
And you consult and you write books and you give a lot of talks. And I wanted to ask you, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like it's fair to say that you've built sort of a reputation for challenging kind of outdated marketing ideas and maybe kind of trying to write the new playbook, or at least help people write their own new playbook. One of the things I've seen a lot of lately, and this might be controversial, I don't know, through the course of business and meeting people and working on events and working on a lot of projects, I've ended up running into the same marketing director over and over and over again. And it's like they're all kind of roughly the same age. They all have sort of the same MBA from the same handful of universities. They all kind of approach things with the same framework, to the point where like we've actually had conversations on my team where we're like, we can kind of predict what they're going to say before we walk into the meeting. Is that something you've seen, and is that good? Is that challenging? If everyone's got the same tools and they've got the same training and they're reading from the same book, how do you break out as a brand? How do you kind of do something that gets in front of the consumer and makes them actually pay attention?
I mean, that is a super deep and important question. One of the things that I talk about in my new book is this scaffolding, this infrastructure we have in our industry that keeps boring in place, and it keeps competent in place instead of audacious, instead of creative. Part of it, I think, is this sort of intoxicating relationship we have with our agency. We've worked with the agency for years. We have a contract with agency. We like to be wined and dined. Agencies have a certain way of doing business, and that makes us conform to this structure. There's a story, I can't remember, I think it was in another book, but I was working with this brand manager, this gigantic company. They had this universal contract. Every idea they had to go through the ad agency.
Yeah, that was in Audacious. Yeah.
That was in Audacious.
Okay, yeah.
And the woman told me, she said, every answer comes back an ad. I'm so frustrated, I want to quit. That's part of it. I think another part of it was bureaucracy, where it's easy to be average because that's what gets approved by the legal department. I think it's easy to be average because boring has been institutionalized in most industries. When you think about it, it's shocking how bad advertising and marketing is. If you think about the automotive industry, this is an industry with this heritage and this excitement and this sexiness. All the ads are the same and nothing really stands out. An example a lot of people in America can relate to is pizza is fun, and everybody loves pizza. And what's the most creative thing happening in pizza? We have this ad, nobody out pizzas the hut. What does that even mean? Is that the best you can do? So there's this infrastructure of dull that is just rewarded. And it doesn't mean that people don't want to do better. And that's one of the big challenges I offer in this book, that there might be legal reasons to be boring. If that's the case, okay, you don't want to go to jail, just be cool. But if you are just competent and boring because you're afraid, that's got to be challenged. That's got to change, because AI is going to eat you alive. AI is competent. It is more than competent. And if you're not doing something a little nuts, you're going to be just run over.
Let's talk about, and I hope you are familiar with this example, because I want to get into details about what you're talking about. So I work in automotive. You're absolutely right. So much of the marketing, especially the paid media, is so rinse and repeat, right? And that's true. It is what it is. One of the things you got into in Audacious that I'd never heard things phrased this way before, but you talk about how most marketing is done sort of on a flat surface. And I was like, I've never really heard it described that way, but that's valid, right? Whether it's an iPad, a bumper ad on YouTube, a print ad in a newspaper, a tablet from 1,000 years ago, whatever, Gutenberg printing press, it's all kind of flat. Certainly automotive, you're right. It all kind of looks the same. A recent example of one that didn't look the same was, Jaguar hired a new agency and they did this rebrand and this crazy campaign, and there was no car in the campaign, and there was a very kind of ethnically diverse group of people strutting around with like weird colors, and nobody understood what to make of it. And I don't know about you, my LinkedIn feed melted down for like 3 days after that campaign came out, and it was super divisive. A few people loved it, a ton of people hated it. They caught a ton of heat. And based on your book, which I enjoyed, you're kind of saying like you just have to do something to rise above.
I mean, I liked it.
That's what I wanted to know. It's like, what's your take? There's no car in the ad.
I wrote a blog post. I realized I was probably the only blogger in the world that liked it. Now, there is a caveat. So when it came out, I thought, holy cow, it's like they took a page right out of my book. They're doing something bold and different. And even if you hated it, it caught your attention and you were talking about it.
Right.
No one has talked about Jaguar for decades.
Now, the earned media that came out of that paid campaign was off the charts.
Off the charts. And I mean, here's something stunning. Me personally, my demographic is probably like the ideal customer for a Jaguar. I don't know one person who owns a Jaguar. I don't know one person who aspires to own a Jaguar. So look, they had nothing to lose because they were meaningless. Here was my assumption. Whenever you do a campaign like this, it's never done in a vacuum. Marketing is not about the creative. It's about the research. Here's another audacious campaign that set the marketing world on fire. That was the Nike campaign with the quarterback Colin Kaepernick. And they lost, I think it was $4 billion of market value in 24 hours or something like that. People were burning Nike products in the streets. And within 10 days, they had increased their market capitalization. But here was the difference. Nike, they had the data. They had the numbers. And here's a little secret. Adidas made the same deal to Colin Kaepernick. They were both in negotiation with Colin Kaepernick. to create a campaign and have their own line of clothing because they knew that demographic. They knew to be welcome on that island, that demographic, they needed to earn trust. And to earn that trust, they had to show shared meaning and values. Hugely successful, massively successful, even though people hated it. Some people hated it and burned the clothes. Now, what's the difference with Jaguar? I'm wondering if they miscalculated on the data or they didn't have the data. The reason I liked it, I'm thinking, if you look at the history of the person behind the campaign, they made decisions steeped in data and knowing the market. So I'm not sure what was wrong there. I didn't particularly like the creative, but I love the fact that they just smacked the industry across the head and said, we demand your attention. We will not be ignored. And for that, I applauded them.
That's a really interesting perspective. I guess a question I have coming out of that answer is another reference. There was a line in your book that was almost like a throwaway line, but it really stuck in my head because I've lived it. And I wish I could quote it. I should have written it down. I apologize. But the essence of the line was something like, the creatives rarely understand the strategy that they're handed. And can you explain that? Because it sounds like that's kind of connected to this conversation of, I would say certainly at ad agencies, more than even like a PR agency or a marketing agency, it's always kind of strategy first, and then it gets handed over to a creative team to execute it. And there does sometimes seem like there's a disconnect there. Is that still the case? And how does that work?
Super interesting observation. This book was so fun for me to write and so inspiring for me to write because I got to visit those agencies. I got to visit some of the most creative agencies, most creative people in the world, starting with Giant Spoon, who is named, I think, number 13 most creative company in the world. Not creative agency, creative company in the world by Fast Company magazine. I got to meet with Mischief Agency, winning all the awards. I mean, just breaking all the rules. Taboo Agency in Australia, which they're known for sort of crazy stuff, in your face sort of bold ideas. I got to meet with Michael Kravica, the king of viral video. And here's the thing, Dan. Every place I went, every person I talked to said over and over again, strategy, 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 because you have got to be aligned with the customer goals and the customer vision. It was never handed off to creative. Creative integrated with the strategy. The strategy people were in the room always. I mean, look, you got to go through the creative process, throw out a lot of ideas that aren't going to make sense. But when it starts getting down into execution, it has got to be aligned with strategy. That was really very impressive and consistent everywhere I went. Bianca Guimaras, from one of the co-founders of the Mischief Agency, said what makes her different is that she doesn't want to have any fear in her agency with her creatives because she wants to show the customer is not against them and they're not against the customer, is that we're all pulling in the same direction. We're all trying to achieve the same goal because we are 100% aligned with the strategy. I love your question because that is a real key to success with these companies that are getting attention by doing something bold. It's not a stunt. It's 100% based in strategy.
So bring the creatives in from step one, have them bought in, have them contributing, and then everyone's executing the thing that they helped build in the first place.
Yep, absolutely.
I love that. So one of the things that belonging to the brand gets into, it talks a lot about the value of community. I think you say like a healthy brand community, is sort of essential today. What does that look like in 2025?
So let me back up one step. The idea behind the Audacious book, I think it just sort of worked out in this magical way. The idea behind Audacious is, where do humans fit in this marketing world? Now, Audacious is not the whole picture. It's not the whole idea. If you zoom out, where is unique human capabilities going to thrive and survive and transcend AI? There's 3 places. One is your personal brand. I'm not worried about AI. People are still going to read my blog with or without AI. People are still going to read my books with or without AI because they know me and they trust me, and I've built up this personal brand. So that transcends AI. So that was a book that I wrote. I wrote a book on personal branding. Then I wrote this book on community. That's pillar number 2. We're always going to need community. As a human being, we don't just want community. We need community because that helps form our identity. No matter what happens in this world, if a brand can create a community, it's the ultimate emotional connection, because people are not just connected to, they love your soft drink or they love your cosmetics. They love each other in the community and they literally belong to the brand. Again, that transcends AI. Now we get to the third part, and that's where Audacious comes in. And it's this uniquely human transcendental content. It's these activations. It's this excitement that we can create as humans. And one of the things I talk about in the book is a big idea because it's so overlooked. It's this idea of collective effervescence, contagious emotion of awe that happens when you bring people together in meaningful ways, because we live in this society where people are longing to belong. They're longing to come together. And if you watch the news, you're going to see this everywhere once you hear me talking about it, that there's this backlash now. There's these trends of young people, Gen Z, coming together to watch movies, to talk about books, to listen to music. So just watch what's happening. And that is awe. Now, the opportunity is, how can we do that as companies? How can we do that as marketing? I challenge people in the book, what would it look like if your marketing plan was add more awe to our customers' lives, make us part of the discussion, make us memorable, create something in their lives that's so worthy, so interesting, so compelling, they can't wait to talk to their friends and neighbors about it. That's kind of how it all fits together, I think. And maybe there's another pillar out there somewhere, but I think, where do humans fit in the AI marketing world? Personal brand, community, transcendental content.
That makes sense. And I can see that. And I liked the example you gave at the beginning of Audacious about how you're at South by Southwest and everyone's at a restaurant and everyone stops eating and you go outside and there's a drone show.
It's crazy.
And I mean, that's brilliant. And everyone's out there and they've got their phone out. Let's get into the book for a few, if that's okay. So like I said, I've read a couple of your books, including Cumulative Advantage. I stupidly made assumptions about your book before I started it. And I thought it was going to be another marketing book about how to use AI. And then, it became very clear by the end of chapter 1, we're like, no, this is the opposite of that. This is like kind of how to counter program basically against AI with real human, maybe would it be fair to say like the value of having emotional connections and creating those kind of impactful moments?
As I said, I love solving hard problems. And the hardest problem right now is, where are we going to fit? What are our jobs going to look like? So I had to do a lot of research, really a lot of reflection and introspection of, where does humanity fit in the AI marketing world? So as I said, I came up with part of the answer. It's not the whole answer, but I think if you look at those 3 books that I wrote, they do kind of fit together as a good part of the answer.
Well, I certainly agree with everything you said in the book, which was 90% of the book, about kind of creating these sort of emotionally impactful experiences that people want to talk about and share. I think that is the gold standard. I guess what I did want to kind of not push back, but at least ask about is, like you said, you were a journalism major. I was a journalism major a long time ago. And to date myself, at my university, I was the editor of the school paper for a year. We were still doing paste up layout. So,
Me too.
Right? Okay. So
yeah.
And to those listening who have no idea what we're talking about.
You have the waxing machine.
The roller thing, and you'd run it through.
The waxer. Yeah.
And you'd roll it through the waxer and you'd lay it out on a blue line. And then some guy had this weird job that I didn't understand called the production guy. And he would shoot a picture of the layout and then like turn that into some sort of a plate. So, I mean, I'm old. That's cool. And then I went on to a magazine journalism career before I made the jump. And at the time we had photographers. I was like a mediocre photographer, but if I had to do something in a pinch, I could bring a camera. We shot everything on chrome film. And then you get back to the office and you'd send it off somewhere. And a week later, a box of slides shows up and you've got a light table and a loop and you shoot 250 photos and hope 5 of them turned out. If they didn't, you're kind of screwed because you can't go back in time and reshoot it. Right?
Yeah, I'm the only person in your audience that understands anything.
I know, right? I'm totally speaking Greek right now. So my point being, at the time, if the photo didn't turn out, you're kind of just like, it is what it is, right? And then I remember the day that the publishing company, which was one of the biggest publishing companies in the country at the time, had a meeting and they sat everyone down and said, we did a deal with Canon and we bought everyone these digital cameras. And the older guys in the room were furious. It was like the world had collapsed on them, right? Then there was some of us, like I was in my 20s, there was other guys in their 20s, and we're like, okay, that's cool, we'll try it. And within a couple of weeks, we're like, this is amazing. We can see what's
Infinite film.
boom. I can see if it turned out, I can reshoot it. That was the early days of Photoshop. You can actually dial it in. Now, I'm not a great photographer, but what has happened in the years since is now, I mean, I've got guys I work with today that they go into a shoot framing and composing stuff knowing that it's going to look like crap on the back of the camera, because that's not the goal. The goal is I need the raw material to then layer something in Photoshop or in Lightroom, and I'm going to make this composite image. And I have no idea how that works or how to do that, but good for them. You still need to know. You have to have the idea for the shoot. You have to have the shot list. You have to know how to compose. You have to know how to talk to people to get what you need out of them emotionally for the photo. So to me, what digital photography ended up being was an accelerant. It was a tool that made them better and made them faster and allowed them to produce better results. So I do wonder, does AI have to be like an us versus them thing, or can it be an accelerant that makes you more productive and allows you to sort of ideate more and quickly in a way that still allows you to preserve those human connections?
Both. So let me answer it a couple of ways. I love art. I just got back from Paris. I was in an art museum at least 4 or 5 hours a day, every day for 6 days. And I think that human art will survive. Human art will persist even in the face of AI, because art is an expression of the human experience. And AI might be able to fake it, but we're still going to appreciate an author, an artist, a musician. We don't want to go to a concert and listen to AI. We want to see this person that we love. I think what that suggests is that our marketing content, our corporate content, better approach the level of art for the human component to be relevant. The second part of it is that I wish I could be an artist, but I'm not that good of an artist. I dabble in watercolor. But with AI, like a search engine for my imagination, I can create almost anything I can imagine. And that's fun. It's really, really fun. And the art that I use on my blog posts, I put a lot of thought into it. And there's subtlety even. There's even like secret little messages sometimes that go with the writing. I might be the only person that gets it or appreciates it, but it's important to me because it is sort of my expression. It's part of my art. In that respect, it's an enabler. However, I think for a lot of the jobs that we do in marketing, it is going to be replacement. And I think this is where a lot of people are soothing themselves, and they're going to come up with a shop, because there's this quote that I absolutely hate. It's all over the place, that you won't be replaced by AI. You'll be replaced by people who know and learn AI. This is more than an enabling technology. Spreadsheets are an enabling technology. It helps you organize and do things better. Something like Canva for the artist is an enabling technology. But this is like the horse and buggy. If you are in the horse and buggy business, there is no amount of knowledge you could have about cars that's going to save that horse and buggy business. You are being replaced. And so it's both. And I think the appropriate sort of emotional response to AI is both excitement and terror. If you know enough about AI, you should be tremendously excited and, at least a little terrified because of the possible scope of the change. So I think the answer is both.
That's a good answer. I wonder, you talk about your love of art. At least I think you're a Floyd guy, right?
Yeah.
Okay, me too.
Well, you've done deep research, my friend.
Hey, I read your books. But I think, at least in my perspective, and I have a lot of artistic people in my family. I'm probably the least artistic of them. It seems like pain is a necessary, or at least struggle, if not pain, is a necessary component. And like, if you look at Floyd, would Floyd be Pink Floyd if Syd Barrett hadn't started the band and then had his sort of issues?
Crisis.
And he leaves, and then you've got Roger, and he doesn't appear, from anything I've observed, to be a particularly well-adjusted or nice person, even though he's very talented. And then Gilmore, who seems like a pretty normal, nice guy and is a brilliant guitar player. But like, there's a lot of strife and pain and weird stuff going on there. You look at the Beatles, same thing, where there's like a lot of weird conflict. And I wonder, when there's so much sort of velocity and lubricity in this process, where I can just turn on an app on my phone. I don't even have to sit at a desk. And I can say, here's this thing I want. Create this image. I want a polar bear riding an eagle over a volcano. And like, boom, it appears. And I'm like, okay, there is no pain there. It's all so fast. But do you think at some level, marketing is art. I know some people would probably argue against that, but I'd like to still pretend like it is. And whether you're the copywriter or you're the strategist or you're the designer or you're working in production on a piece of video content, I feel like the stuff that's the most emotionally impactful for the consumer is the one where it does elicit some sort of a strong reaction. And if everything is so easy and so polished and so clean, will the stuff that's still made by hand, or at least analog, be more powerful and more effective because it did require that grind to get there? Or does that become a non-issue?
Well, boy, you really are asking me some great questions. I would replace pain with honesty. Pain can help, but I think it's just so refreshing to have a voice from a person or a company that's honest. And honest means maybe admitting mistakes sometimes. It might be being vulnerable sometimes. Pain maybe can get into the oversharing department. I create content sometimes. Well, I'll give you an example. I just gave a big speech in Romania, and there were thousands of people there. And someone came up to me after my speech and they said, "Oh, Mr. Schaefer, thank you so much. I really needed to hear this. This gave me hope." I don't sugarcoat things. I don't want to mislead anybody, but I do want to be honest, but I do want to be positive where I can and to dispense hope where I can. So I don't think, pain is necessarily the big idea, but I think honesty is the big idea. And I also want to build on your idea about the human qualities. One of my favorite stories from the Audacious book, when I interviewed Michael Kravica, and he creates these amazing viral videos. And he said, "My competitors always try to copy me and they never can. You want to know why?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Because they try to be perfect, because they try to make it like Hollywood." He said, "My videos, sometimes I leave it a little out of focus. Sometimes the audio isn't quite right. I don't use AI at all because I want to leave those little imperfections in there to comfort people and let them know this is real. What you're seeing is real and the reactions are real and that this is human." And I think that is a great lesson. I think that's a great lesson. And I think it's a sort of a North Star for where we need to be with our marketing. And I'll just add one more point. I happen to think about this. We started our conversation talking about how I got into marketing because of Dr. Philip Kotler and how he described marketing. Well, the man is still alive. I think he's 93. He's still active, writing books. He's on podcasts. He was on a podcast a few years ago. And he said, what's missing in the marketing world today is a true human voice that's friendly, accessible, even vulnerable. And I just love that. And he's absolutely right. Like I said, it doesn't have to come from pain, but it does have to come with this authentic honesty.
Yeah, kind of vulnerability maybe is a better word than pain, right? One of the things you also have written about, and it's also something I wanted to ask about, Mark, is you've done a great job with your own personal branding and kind of, from your blog and your books and your speaking, and you've done a great job sort of building a brand around yourself. For business leaders that want to stand out, either in their own company or in their field or in their industry, personal connection, I think, often can be very powerful, sometimes even more so than the messaging of the company you work for. Is that the case? And how do people do that? How do they kind of break out in a world where everyone's got a million social profiles and LinkedIn pages and everyone's got a podcast? And how does a leader do that in a way that allows them to sort of stand out while still kind of honoring the company they work for?
Well, I think you have to be, and by the way, I love the way you characterize this and still honor the company you work for, because that could be an issue sometimes. The 10th anniversary of the Known book is coming up. That's the book I wrote on personal branding. My project for next year is to write a new edition of that book. And one of the things I want to talk about in this book is I get a lot of requests about how do you develop a personal brand in a company. Well, it basically gets down to a couple of main ideas. Number one is you have to be clear about where you fit in the world. What's the problem going on in the world? What's keeping people up at night with your customers or within your company? And what is special about you that can help people solve that problem in a unique way? It takes some work to really think about that. Where do I fit? Where do I add value in this vast ecosystem? But you'll be rewarded if you spend some time thinking about that, because once you can finish this sentence, only I, your entire personal branding, marketing plan unveils itself, because now I know what to say. I know who cares about it. I know where I should tell the story. I know how I should tell the story. And it kind of sets you down the path. Now, the path It might not be perfect, but it'll get you started, and you morph and change over time. And you need to show up consistently. I had a fella buy consulting time from me one time. He said, "Oh, blogging doesn't work." I said, "Why do you think so?" He said, "Well, because in 2017, I wrote 3 blog posts and nothing happened." Well, of course not.
A whole three,
One of
huh?
the things, yeah, 3. One of the things I teach in my classes is that consistency is more important than genius. You want to become a habit. You want people to start looking for you and your ideas. And then I think it also takes a certain amount of courage, because we just talked about this idea of honesty that might even lead to vulnerability. And gosh, that's scary. What if people think I'm dumb? What if people think I'm wrong? I've had almost 100,000 comments on my blog, and I've deleted 9. Generally, people are nice. And if they see that you're doing good work and you're trying to be helpful, they might disagree with you, which is cool. But normally people will support you. And the only 9 comments I deleted, these were people attacking each other. And I had to draw a line, being clear about where you fit. What is your message? And then having the courage to get out there and be generous and share your ideas on a consistent basis. That's the key path to becoming known with a personal brand.
I love that. I think that's great advice for somebody who wants to sort of grow their own presence. What about the flip side? What about brands that are looking at, influencers, content creators, whatever you want to call them? I know you talked in your book about Mr. Beast, Jimmy Donaldson and all that. Like, he's sort of the Uber influencer, I guess. Is that still a valid path? Is that the valid path? How should brands approach that if they're kind of hitching their wagon to this external voice and presence that probably talking to them because they have some huge follower count, but you also can't really control their brand, right? How does that work?
I think influencer marketing is very important. It's believed and it's trusted. And the main reason 60% of Gen Z goes to social media every day is to see what their favorite influencers are doing, because they're not influencers. They're friends. They might even be considered family members. So if an influencer is starting to talk about your product, that's like having your brother or sister telling you about this product. I think a lot of the negative things with influencers get covered because that makes news, right? It's silly or it's funny. But I think the overall trend is very, very important and profound. And I think it's just starting. Embedded in your question is a really interesting nuance. One of the companies I featured in the Audacious book, in fact, there was a whole chapter about the cosmetic company Elf. Elf is doing a lot of amazing things. They are rewriting the rules of marketing in many respects. And one of their key strategies has been to rely on influencers, especially on TikTok. Well, in the first quarter of this year, their earnings actually went down. And one of the reasons is because their traction on TikTok went down, because what was happening in the first quarter, or what was happening at the end of last year? Everybody thought TikTok was going away. So everybody kind of was going off TikTok, and the people who were on TikTok were talking about TikTok going away instead of Elf Cosmetics. Did the strategy backfire? I think that was sort of a one-off vulnerability, sort of a wrench in the works. I think overall, though, the long-term idea in B2B or B2C, the idea of working with influencers is still really important. And I think it's just starting. The next competitor for Elf or L'Oreal or any perfume or cosmetic company isn't Unilever. It's a 19-year-old influencer. They're the new brand builders.
Look at Kylie Jenner. She built a
Yeah.
billion-dollar brand with her own social
Yeah,
platform.
Elf just bought an influencer brand, Hailey Bieber's brand, for $1 billion this week. They're getting ahead of it.
Fascinating. Mark, you've been super generous with your time. One of the questions I ask guests on the show, and I'd really like to hear about it from you, is I am unfortunately a School of Hard Knocks guy. And most of my major lessons I've learned is because I screwed something up and went, okay, can't do that again. So how do I move forward? When you think back on your career as an author and a thought leader, a marketer, what's the biggest mistake you made and what did you learn from it?
I make so many mistakes. I mean, my whole career has been basically a continuous series of experiments. I had a pretty big business failure. It was a software I had developed with some other people. We put together this big team. I invested a lot of my own resources and money into it, and it worked. The reason it failed is because I was a terrible salesperson, and the B2B sales process just wore me down. And I thought, oh my gosh, there's 25 other things I would rather be doing than this. The mistake I made was I knew I was out of my area of expertise and I didn't bring in the right people to help. And it just got to the point where nothing was happening. The sales were all botched up. We weren't closing the deals, and it was because of me. It just got too late and too expensive to repair the thing. So it was sort of arrogance. It wasn't a lack of self-awareness, but just some misplaced confidence that I could transcend my ability to be a terrible salesperson. Because I am a terrible salesperson. I hate promotion. I hate self-promotion. I'm totally uncomfortable with it. I'm a success in spite of myself. So that was one of the most painful mistakes I made.
But yet, you've got a lot of best-selling books. So is it the idea that sells itself? Is it you just make something great? And how did those books sell so well?
You build a personal brand, and the personal brand collects an audience who trusts you and even loves you. And then they subscribe to your blog and they subscribe to your podcast. And whenever you say, okay, I've written a new book, they say, hooray, this is what we've been waiting for. We can't wait to buy it. Some of that audience becomes your community, and the community says, not only are we going to buy it, we're going to help you sell it because you have been so generous to us. You've been so helpful to us. We just want to help you to give you something back. So there's nothing I can do to sell a book. It's got to be other people and kind people like you who believe in me enough to have me on your podcast and say, Mark, I've read your books and I like your books and I trust you and I want to share your ideas with my audience. What an honor that is, Dan. So thank you for having me on here today.
Well, I love that. And thank you for the time. To wrap this up, where do people go to learn more about you, your blog, your books, your speaking, engagements? How do they learn more about Mark Schaefer?
Well, it's very easy. You don't have to remember my name, let alone how to spell Schaefer. You just go to Businesses Grow. If you can remember Businesses Grow, you can find me. You can find my podcast. We've talked, I think, about 3 or 4 of my different books today. You can find them at Businesses Grow and find them on Amazon. And you can find all my social media links too. And I'd love to connect with you and hear from you.
Wonderful. Thank you. That wraps up this episode of Only the Strong Survive. If you enjoyed it, please make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and follow us on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.